And we're live. Thank you, everyone. My name is Jessica Del Vecchio. I'm with the City of Boca Raton's Office of Economic Development. And joining me today is Ken Krasnow. He is the Vice Chairman of Colliers Institutional Investor Services in the state of Florida. Thank you, Ken, for being here. And Michael Feuerman. Michael is the Managing Director of Berger Commercial Realty. And we wanted to get your perspective on what we're seeing with COVID and how it's affecting our commercial real estate markets, our commercial tenants. But first, before we dive into all that, if maybe we'll start with you, Ken, give us a little background on what you do on a day-to-day basis, and we can get into how things have changed once we get kind of a good feel for what you guys do on a day-to-day.
Great. Well, happy to be here, Jess. Thank you for hosting us. So I oversee Colliers in the South Florida region. So, we have about 6 offices here, covering the Tri-County region. It's a very interesting, obviously, time in our environment. I moved down here about 10 years or so ago, and lived through the aspects of 9/11. I was running a firm in New York at the time. So while there are a tremendous amount of similarities, there's also a tremendous amount of differences in this environment. So it's going to be a interesting time as we kind of work our way through this. Anybody that thinks life goes back to the way it was before, I think, is going to be sadly mistaken, and it gives people opportunities to kind of reinvent themselves, reinvent their businesses, which is, I think, what we've seen through all of these various revolutions. So we can touch on the market. I'll let Michael talk a little bit about what he's doing. But for most important, we're dealing with a lot of our institutional clients, big, major pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, so on and so forth. So that's my role today, and it obviously touches on all aspects of our real estate industry, and I look forward to discussing that with you in a few.
Good. Can't wait to hear it. I have a hedge fund background myself, so I know about the institutional side. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really good. Michael, if you could give us a little background, please, so that we can know basically your day-to-day operations, what you do for the most part, and then we can, again, dive into the changes we're all, encountering.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on here, Jess, and it's nice to be on here with Ken, of course. So I am the Managing Director for Berger Commercial Realty in South Florida. We're based in Fort Lauderdale. My office is in Boynton Beach, and I'm the Managing Director for Palm Beach County. We also have an office in Miramar. We have about 15 brokers. We manage about probably 7 million square feet, 8 million square feet, and we have about 6.5 million listed for lease or sale. My day-to-day role is as a tenant representative for office and flex industrial tenants. So I represent the business owners who need to find the space where their employees are going to be working, to put it simply. Prior to getting into this field in 1999, I was a commercial trial lawyer for 6 years, litigating business disputes, including a lot of lease transactions. So I've been through, as a lawyer, the S&P crisis in the early mid-90s. I've been through the dot-com bubble burst. I've been through the Great Recession. And all through these periods, I've worked with my clients, in good times and bad, to help them negotiate the best lease and purchase terms for their offices.
Excellent. So, yes. So, Michael, I know you from a few projects that we've worked on together locally at the corporate side. And then Ken, you were one of my first calls when I first started at the city 5 years ago, and you let me come down on Glades Road and meet your team, and I will never forget that. So thank you both. Relationships are everything, especially in your business. Why don't we go into some of the new things that you're seeing, kind of something out of the ordinary? We don't want to talk specific companies or names, anything of that magnitude, but just give us an idea of some of the things that you're seeing. We're hearing a lot about we're all online now, and are people going back to the office? Are they looking for more or less space? You guys are actually in the trenches. So again, we can start with you, Ken, and then we can see what you're seeing.
Sure.
Obviously, there are no trends until they last a while, but we'll discuss some of the things you're seeing.
Well, it is kind of interesting. Colliers is obviously a global organization, and we are probably the dominant player in China. And so over the last, I would say, 6 weeks, we've really been digging down and spending a lot of time with our counterparts over there. They are basically 8 to 10 weeks kind of ahead of us. And so we've watched as they've kind of moved out of their, to a certain degree, their post-COVID world. I mean, we're never really out of a post-COVID world. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to be a term we're going to be living with for a number of years to come. But we have started to see, some transformation on the office side, on the retail side, the industrial, the supply chain side, how they've managed to kind of move through and I'm going to get tired of saying the new normal, because I think the new normal is kind of a beaten phrase, but clearly, the retail world was in transition before, COVID, right? With the advent of e-commerce and so on and so forth. And what we've done with this kind of forced shutdown or this forced experiment has really accelerated trends that were probably going to take place over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years in a matter of, 2 to 3 months. And so if you're not, as a retailer, as a fully embraced kind of, internet omni-channel perspective, you're not going to survive in the, kind of in this post-technology world, because I think we've all come to understand, and so what we're seeing as they move out of this in parts of the Far East, that the internet is here to stay, and the consumer patterns and shopping and deliveries and online pickups and everything else like that is not going away just because you can go back to the store or the restaurant or so on and so forth. So certain companies have been, moving slowly to embracing this kind of, omni-channel world. But I think it's a complete accelerant now, and companies that are planning to kind of go through this reopening have really got to embrace a full-on internet component to their business, or else they're sadly not going to survive. So retail is one world. I know Michael does a lot on the office side as well, so I'll let him touch a little bit on that, but there's a lot of dynamics and changes in the office as well. Great
insight. Michael.
Yes. So everything Ken is saying, I've been seeing on the retail side. We keep up with the trends. We read everything. We're watching, what's happening, as you said, in the trenches. What are landlords willing to do? What are tenants trying to do? There's the initial hump of getting through this period of economic slowdown with 14 or 15% unemployment, and everybody's business is kind of either ground to a halt on the retail side or slowed down. Some things are in pause mode, some things are going forward, some transactions, we certainly have some new deals coming through also. But what Ken's seeing on the retail side, I echo. On the office side, which is where I spend my day-to-day work, we're seeing a lot of changes. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, but we're anticipating that when people come back to work, and Palm Beach County is now officially opened back up, Broward and Dade, I think, in a week or two, we're seeing a reluctance to go back. So people are a little bit nervous. There's no reason to rush back. Working at home is actually just going so well that there's no urgency to rush back to the office. Now, for some people, physicians, who are better off treating patients in person, it's going to be different. But for folks like us, commercial real estate brokers, do we need to be in the office? This is working out fine. When we need to go out and show space and see space with our clients, that's going to be a different story. We're going to have to do that. But the changes in offices, the physical changes, are going to be numerous. So there's a question of safety when you go back within the common areas. It's going to be like a cruise ship, I think, where you see hand sanitizer everywhere, limited number of people inside of elevators. You're going to have one direction within the office that people can travel, so they're not crossing paths. You may have some people working in shifts, so you have half the number in the office at one time, half the other time to keep the crowds down. Maybe staggered starting times, sizes of workstations. I don't think you're going to see benching anymore which is what we call the 2x4 desks in a call center with people sitting side by side. You can't have 12 people in a 12-person conference room. There's going to be a lot of changes that have to do with social distancing. And there may be changes that vary the amount of square footage somebody needs. Because if people can work at home effectively and companies can cut costs, we may see square footage coming down.
Okay, that's
And of
good
course,
insight.
I was going to say not to challenge Michael, because he's obviously a lot smarter, as a reformed attorney. But we've done some pretty extensive surveys over the last 8 weeks or so, and have just got a lot of data. And I agree with a lot of what Michael's talking about with regards to changes in the physical office. But one thing I will kind of disagree with is I do think that the office, the place, is taking on more importance in this environment. I think what we have learned is working from home is here to stay, but the place, the office, the environment, the place where you collaborate, the place where you get your creative, kind of juices flowing, that's going to become more important than ever. And people are yearning to return to that kind of, that kind of environment. So, forgive me, it will entail a lot of change. And I think for argument, we're sitting here in Boca. I think for markets like ours, it's going to be actually a positive dynamic, because what a market like a Boca, or anywhere generally in South Florida, has to offer is a vibrancy, but also some space and some sort of quality of life. And I think that those premiums are going to be, really important as people, do look to get back to the office. And I do think that people are looking to get back to the office, and yet still work from home and be productive. And there's certain things that they can do at home that they would prefer to do at home, and they will have that option as more and more companies adopt this kind of work-life balance. I think everybody has talked about that for years. How do we get work-life balance? How do we give people more choice? We've now been forced into into doing it.
That's very good information, Ken, actually, about the work-life balance. So we work with the corporate community primarily through our office, and we're hearing about companies that have invested all this money into the IT, software, hardware, of being able to work from home. Their productivity numbers, for the most part, are actually up as far as activity. But we've heard both sides. They're going to need less space when they move back in, when they're comfortable enough to move back in with all their employees, or somewhat more space, depending on spreading them out, having, like you just mentioned, Michael, that they're not going to have 20 people in their conference room anymore. Maybe they have 2 conference rooms. I'm just curious, like, what you're seeing. Are you showing any spaces? Are you doing virtual space tours? Like, how does that all work nowadays?
And I agree with Ken that being in the office is critical. Collaboration, impromptu meetings, they all enhance productivity. So the office is not going away. There's no question. And to your point, Jess, there will be competing concerns. Do you need more space because workstations have gotten bigger? Conference rooms are going to have to be duplicated. Yes. And do you need less space because some people will continue to work from home on a regular basis? Yes.
Right.
We'll see how that all plays out. I think overall, what we're hearing is companies are going to need slightly less space. But getting back to your question, I think that the offices are going to get smaller. Some of the other things I wanted to touch on are who's going to win when offices do change physically. So I think the big winners are going to be companies that come in and retrofit space. So you're going to need sanitization initially before you go in. You're going to need it on a nightly basis, maybe even midday if there's a change in shifts. You're going to need HVAC upgrades so the filtration is better, and there's hopefully some filtration that keeps viruses out. You're going to need touchless access. You're going to need touchless access, not just inside the office, getting in the front door, getting through doors, but in the restrooms, no touch faucets, no touch toilets. there's going to be a lot of changes, and in the common areas as well. So as far as your,
I have a question coming in regarding this, but I'll let you finish. But someone actually just sent a question in regarding cleaning the offices and such, what you're seeing. I'll pull it up and I'll read it aloud, but please go ahead.
But to directly answer your question, are people going out and touring space? Yes. People in my firm are showing space. The landlord reps are showing space. As of yet, my clients, I've presented surveys and said, here's what's available. And they've said, let's hold off just for now before we go back out. When they do it, generally people are wearing masks and keeping distance.
Of course.
They are out there. If someone has a lease expiration, they've got to get busy. They've got to find a location.
Funny you say that. So we've actually moved a company in now through COVID. Like they started beforehand. Obviously, these deals, you guys know this better than anyone. They take months, They're from out of state. They've been looking in Boca. We've been helping them. And they did sign their lease while COVID was going on. And people are like, how did that happen? I'm like, well, because like you just said, their lease is expiring. They've been wanting to do it. This is not, it's very crazy times, of course, but people still have to conduct their business for the longer term. I do not want to ignore this. Someone sent in a question. I'll give it to you both, but Michael, you had touched upon some of the occupying the spaces for cleanliness. So someone says, what steps should businesses be taking to prepare for reoccupying their office? In the ideal world, it seems we'd have, at bare minimum, regular testing and sanitization. What can we do to get there?
So, the sanitization for COVID-19 is going to be much higher than what you have on a regular basis. And that's just going to be wiping desks, vacuuming once a week, the typical 5-night-a-week janitorial service you get. There are companies that are specializing in this. Your best bet is to talk to a property management company. Berger Commercial Realty does property management, and we could certainly get you, in touch with companies that do this high-level sanitization. It's not something that I know step by step what you do.
Right.
Our specializing.
And we're not holding you to that. So go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
And we've also I think we manage 30-odd million square feet here in the state, and have a very detailed, step-by-step kind of reentry plan. I do think, temperature checks and are going to be part of our normal daily life. Everybody that comes into in an office, into a specific office space, temperature checks are going to be part of your daily life. Masks are going to be part of your daily life. So I think initially, with regards to health, it's going to be focused around identifying people that may have or exhibit some types of, symptoms and so on and so forth. And so, how do you identify that early, and then obviously, isolate and, and move out. But I agree with Michael, the sanitization, the cleaning, this also will go towards something he touched upon, which is, it's not inexpensive to do all of these technology upgrades, to perform a deeper, higher level, of cleaning. And so, the requisite costs that go, that accompany, this kind of change is inevitable. And again, I go back to the example I use in New York City. If anybody's been up there lately, you can't just walk into an office building now without getting, security checked and going through turnstiles and, and so on and so forth. That wasn't the case, pre 9/11. Has that raised operating expenses for the landlords in the building? Yes. Do they pass that along to the tenants? Yes.
Of course.
And I
someone
think
has to pay.
We're all going to be experiencing that as we kind of move into this new world, because all of these new technologies that we're talking about, you can on your remote, you can just say, get me, Stranger Things, right? You're going to be able to walk in and say, take me to the 12th floor, So everything is going to be, the technology is there. The Michael talked about whether it's the air filtration system, the sensors that are in the office are going to be important, but they're obviously also, expensive. Not every owner, not every building is going to be able to comply with, with those kind of demands. And so that's, again, going to be a sort of a Darwinian kind of experiment here as we move forward, the survival of the fittest. But it's going to be, critical, because that's what the companies, and more importantly, the people that work in those companies are going to demand. Because right now, what you have, a lot of companies telling their people, we're doing all of these steps, we're cleaning, we're sanitizing, but if you do not feel comfortable, you do not need to come back, to the office right away. You can still be productive at home, and so on and so forth. So I think, pre-COVID, and Michael can attest to this as well, talent was important, right? Where do you go to get and secure and retain, the best talent to grow your business, and so on and so forth. The focus on people is shifted towards where can you make your people feel most, comfortable and or most, productive. And so that takes on a whole nother, dynamic in the, in the kind of the growth of your, of your business and of your company.
So true. We've heard from one of the larger landlords, I guess property owners in Boca Raton, commercial property owner, that they're investigating the use of copper countertops, some sort of copper. I'm oversimplifying this, but because apparently there's certain things that aren't porous and things that huge investment, but for the long term, they feel that this would help their tenant base feel more comfortable, less germs, the UV, AC units, the HVAC units. So we're hearing all these these are major expenses for companies and landlords and tenants and owners and all that. But let's just switch gears. Speaking of landlords and tenants, Michael, we'll give this one to you to start with. Have you seen any negotiations that are happening where this might be more on the smaller side of businesses that are trying to negotiate, I've been closed for 6 weeks. How do I can't pay my rent. Can I tack it on at the end? Those types of things. Can you give us some ideas of what people can do or what you're seeing happen?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is very encouraging, because landlords and tenants are working together to try to help tenants get through this, whether it's retail, office, industrial. And the industrial market actually is doing very well. I'm hearing less of a need for tenants to get rent relief in the industrial market. In the office market, some of them are in need of relief right now. So for law firms, maybe billings are down. For doctors who are not in the office seeing patients, they don't have the same reimbursements that they get on a day-to-day basis. They don't want to fire staff. They don't want to furlough staff. They want to keep going. They want to stay open. Everyone hopes this is just a temporary blip and we'll be back to somewhat normal within a couple of months. So what I'm seeing is landlords are open to discussion for the most part. They are willing to listen. They're willing to help. What tenants have to keep in mind is that landlords are going to ask for some proof that your income is down. They're going to ask for some indication that you've sought PPP loans, other SBA funding, business interruption insurance claims. They want to know that you're not just looking to them to help. And landlords also have fixed expenses. They have mortgages they have to pay. In many cases, it's a syndication of investors, so they have preferred investor payments to make. They have CAM operating expenses that Ken touched on earlier. That, by the way, I agree with Ken 100%. Those are going to go up as landlords increase safety in their buildings, the brass and the HVAC and the extra employees and so forth. So landlords are not just sitting there collecting rent checks. They have payments to make. And in many cases, they can't give rent relief without getting the express permission from their lenders. But I'm also hearing that lenders are willing to forego payment for a few months to help landlords. So everyone's kind of working together to get through this. It's a difficult time. I don't think any landlords really, there's always an anomaly, but most landlords don't want to see the tenants go out of business and leave, and they have to release the space. They want to help everybody and get through this together. Ken, you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is a kind of an unprecedented time where all parties are really working together. And one for you, Jess, I would add the government sector as part of this, kind of collaborative partnership, because the cities and the municipalities that also are understanding that whether it's changes in flexible zoning or allowing curbside pickup or other things that they can do as willing partners in this situation is very important in today's world. So yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to communication. I think what Michael touched on is important. I think through these Zoom calls and all these, communication is more important than ever.
Yeah.
And the ones that are kind of out front in the communication, expressing what they're going through, what they're dealing with, what their issues are able to kind of to work through it. But with all of that being said, with even what we're seeing on the specific rent issues are some types of deferments. So some landlords are deferring rent, extending leases, adding it on
Didn't New
to
York just announce that they were halting evictions until about August? So on the commercial side,
Yep.
The commercial side.
Yes. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So there's a level of cooperation to get through this, but make no mistake. I mean, this is severe pain and several and a number of these businesses with all good intentions and good partnerships and so on and so forth are just not going to be able to to make it. And then that's where, again, I think as a city and economic development, it's going to be critical, to help in some of the rebuild that's going to, inevitably take place, because there is going to, whether it's on the restaurant side or whether it's on the, the law firm side or a dentist that, it just is ready to, kind of fold up practice and not have to, go through it again. There's going to be, I think everybody that was expecting this kind of, V-shaped, quick down and then quick back up is
the recovery is
quickly understanding that it's not that easy and it's not that simple. And the pain
I totally agree.
will be felt, for a while here.
I think those are great points. I think anyone who's been through the housing implosion, or like you said, 9/11, we've all been through that if you're our age and above. But you do learn from that, but it takes a long time when you think you're losing your home or you don't want to fly, you don't feel so safe, you're canceling flights. You touched upon something I wanted to go back to, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do have a question coming in, and we'll take that, and I'll look at my notes. Oh, they posted it. How many tenants are going to decide to move to work from home permanently? I'm not sure you can answer that specifically, but certainly I think we touched upon that already, but if you guys want to take that, certainly go right ahead.
Again, our survey, and we're going to publish it, I think, at the end of this month, and it was 25 countries and 6,000 or 7,000 employers and employees. Most people will go back to the office in some way, shape, or form. I think what you are going to see again is a robust work from home strategy. And I also think things that we're doing today, this Zoom call was very kind of, accidental in nature. I think what you'll see is a more robust strategy around kind of the digital, productivity and digital communication, so that it becomes not just something that we can get through, but something that becomes part of our everyday, work experience. So I think, and I know Michael touched on this earlier, the office is here to stay, but it is going to be a completely different environment. Flexibility is going to be critical in this kind of, new work environment. You've got to give people the ability to work from home. You've got to give people who may not want to deal with commuting, whether they're, dealing with, getting on Tri-Rail or, or driving or so on and so forth, and may not want to, commute to the office, other types of environments. So the whole strategy around work will be changing, but I don't see companies abandoning the office.
I think there could be some, Michael mentioned that there could be some staggering of office times, and that, that's something, I mean, I as a just a regular person thinking about it, that would always help with the traffic flow. And, there's so many ups. I'm not trying to like sugarcoat it. Like, this is a pandemic, this is terrible, but there are some upsides to some of the things we're all learning, either about ourselves, about our family life. You can't go back to work if your kids aren't in school, and you don't have some, there's a lot of flexibility. The work-life balance, Ken, that you mentioned earlier, is exactly what we're all tapping into, whether we wanted to or not. We're finding it. I did want to mention, Ken, you mentioned that the government has to have some sort of involvement, and at our level, I think that's so true. And our city's been amazing. Our elected officials have actually relaxed the sign code, which has allowed people to put signs out and say we're open. Back especially in the beginning when it was like everyone was really, really locked down and closed down. They allowed curbside and takeout, touchless, you kind of pull up your car. I've done it myself. But just recently they have allowed outdoor dining with the new phase 1 happening Monday, the 25%. We're allowing more of a temporary outdoor dining kind of atmosphere because we're not sure if people are ready to go and dine and, sitting next to each other. And let's make it as safe and as comfortable. You just said the perception of comfort is what we're all looking for, whether it be in our office space and all of that. So our city has been doing, and I've been working with West Palm Beach Gardens. They've been great. But I think it is something that we all have to kind of do together to kind of embrace it and say, okay, we're going to get back slowly but surely. How do we do that? So if anyone has any comments for us, especially now or later, reach out to my office because we're willing to hear what you have to say to help build the businesses back up to, 25% is not 100%, but it's a lot better than it was just, Friday.
I have heard some certain municipalities are looking at some street closures to allow for that kind of safe, kind of interaction and kind of, more spilling out into the street and kind of closing, vehicular traffic so that, it's become
sidewalk
safer.
Sales for the retailer.
Yeah, I think what we saw in, again, going back to kind of the China experiment was exhibitions, pop-up stores, a lot of things that are kind of bringing people back out, and it is a transition, and it does take a while for people to feel confident and safe, and it doesn't just happen overnight. So a lot of these events, in small and in concentrated pockets where people can be safe but yet still sort of start to venture out into the world again, are important, and that's where again a municipality is a pretty important partner in being flexible and being nimble and creative and working with the the landlords and the tenants that are on those streets and so on and so forth.
So true.
One thing you have to watch is that as many people as there are who are afraid to go back, there are a lot of people who are itching to get back. And I mean, I would love to go out for a meal. Am I going to do it tomorrow? I don't think so, but I can't wait. But I would tell you that some offices have opened back up and they've had too many people come in. So there has to be a structured, organized, orderly transition back to normalcy, whether it's a new normal or the old normal. I would advise tenants when they do open back up, have strict rules about when people can come in, who can come in on particular days, and how many can come in, just to be cautious. Because if it's unorganized, you're going to get a lot of people coming at once, and it becomes more dangerous.
It's a comfort level. We all want to have it for sure. Control it a bit.
You're going to see, assigned, seatings and areas where, kitchens and stuff like that are going to be, closed for a while within offices. And again, some people that, are used to bringing their lunch or coming, to the office and are going to have to kind of adjust to, certain situations like that. But that all goes to the point that, Michael was talking about, which is, you've got to, control the transition back to normal. You can't just kind of flip the switch on and say, okay, everybody, the office is open.
It was kind of easier to flip the switch off. You know what I mean? It's almost easier to flip it off and say, okay, we're going to close down for a week or two or however long this takes. Now we're through that. Well, not 100%, but we're working through it. How do we reopen? It's such a challenge, not just for us as business people, but for elected officials and such. I do want to take this one last question, and then
Sure.
I'll have you guys do some closing remarks, and then we can, any other questions, obviously, that you think should be addressed. It says, is there some kind of metric of how many doors are going to remain closed moving forward? How many businesses have gone out of business and won't reopen? I know it's not a hotel and people don't check out. Good point. But how is this measured? Ken, you have the best analytical data. I read your reports every quarter till I'm blind, but maybe you start with that. We'll start with you on that question.
I don't know if the question was about hotels, but I do think
I
you're
think
going
he
to
was
start.
saying that they don't check out when they close their business. I think.
Yeah. There, unfortunately, there are going to be a number of those that will just, kind of, disappear. The numbers are still a little, spotty out there, and certain businesses are certainly going to feel it, more. We've heard some numbers around, a quarter of the, restaurants, may not make it back. That's a pretty scary number, but it's certainly not beyond, the realm, of possibility, because as you said, Jess, this is an economy that's based on consumer confidence, right? When people are confident in their job, they spend. When people are confident in their environment, they go out and eat, and so on and so forth. And confidence is not something, like you said, that just gets turned on with a switch. People have got to see that I'm not getting sick, or I'm not getting, or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it is going to, and unfortunately, a lot of businesses are not set up to deal with that level of disruption for that, period of time. So the pain, as I sort of, alluded to earlier, is going to be, fairly, dramatic. That being said, I think as you look through every recession and every great, disruption in our time, you look at, a lot of the great companies, the Orange Theories and the so on and so forth of the world that didn't exist, in the other recession. There will be opportunities for new, whether it's food concepts or entertainment concepts, that will fill a lot of these voids that are going to be left. So that's the kind of on the longer term side of it. And that's where I think, cities and landlords and banks and everybody are kind of in it together to understand that there's a bridge to this, kind of new normal. And it's going to be, in some way, shape, or form, fairly painful to get there. But on the other side, I think we in South Florida are, and in Boca and in markets like that, are really, really well positioned. I can't tell you.
I agree. Yeah.
The amount of conversations I've had with my, with my brethren up north, that are sitting in their 700 square foot apartment for the last, 10 weeks.
Paying top dollar, by the way, and taxes. I hear you. They're looking to come down. We've been hammered. Like we've been prospecting the Northeast and Chicago just because the financial aspect. I go after the financial market players because it's what I'm comfortable with my background. But now our phones are ringing because they're sick of it. And then it snowed last week. I didn't know it snowed. Someone called me. Is like, okay, I am done. So a lot of that times they want to just test the waters, get a small office or get a sublease to start, and then they go from there. But it's a long process. But people are really, I guess fed up would be the word. Why pay high taxes, live in your 700 square foot apartment on top of someone else, and then pay taxes?
And again, I think, part of the new kind of work environment was, it used to be, right, the technology is now there where people can be productive from, in theory, everywhere. People are going to get used to managing people remotely, right? You don't have to actually see somebody in the office to know that they're doing a good job. So that dynamic is changing kind of right in front of our eyes, where, people used to walk around the office, and if you didn't see somebody, you assumed that they were goofing off somewhere, or when my dog's in the background barking, that used to be it used to freak people out. But now it's, it's normal. You're working from home. So
I love it. I love it. And I was just saying to Michael earlier, I love the Zooms. I see your environment. I know you guys in suits in your offices. I mean, this is really nice to see. There is some sort of more connection being on a Zoom call with people that you don't get. I mean, I love sitting across the table from you both, but it's just different when you are I'm in your house and you're in my house, you know?
Yep.
So Michael, before we go,
I'm waiting for Michael to get rid of the file cabinet. That's what
I want Michael to play the guitar, but okay.
Let's do another
Michael,
live session tonight. I'll be practicing. So,
all right. Any closing thoughts?
You know, to answer that gentleman's question, there will be closures. I've heard the same numbers about roughly 25% of the restaurants closing. This was such an abrupt event. These aren't restaurants that have, you know, worn out their welcome. You know, their space has significant wear and tear. These are second generation built out restaurants that if they do unfortunately close, there will be people behind them who will step in and put up a new, you know, a new sign, some new decorating, and be up and running in no time. It's going to be a tough loss. There's no question, as Ken said. It's going to be a very tough loss. It's a tough pill to swallow. There are very supportive municipalities like Boca Raton, like Palm Beach County, like the rest of South Florida, that help their tenants, proactively reach out and help their tenants.
Yep.
And everyone's kind of working together. It's not that you know, landlords are making demands on tenants saying pay now.
They have their own demands.
Well, yeah, but they're getting pauses from their lenders, and they're giving tenants pauses in many cases. So a lot of businesses will survive. Some will be lost. It's going to be unfortunate, but they'll backfill. And no, not to disrespect the loss to the people it happens to. It's awful.
No, it's just a fact. I mean, it's just what we're going to be seeing. We want you to be, we had you here for your perspective. You guys have great perspective. And I think we covered a lot of territory. I think the last 2 times we've done this, it's only our 3rd time doing this. We had a lot of questions afterwards that came through my email. So I'll just give you a buzz and maybe set you up with someone who has some questions, and we can go from there. But I really appreciate your time today, both of you. Great insight.
Happy to do it. Anytime, Jess.
Thank
you, Michael. Good seeing you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
If you could both stay on for a minute while we disconnect you both. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Good luck to everybody.
Yes.